Welcome to the Public Voice Salon. We are an open dialogue on education, the arts, and social change. And today we are with Jonas Mekas, who is considered to be the godfather of American avant-garde cinema in his Brooklyn apartment in Clinton Hill. And it is such a great honor to meet you, Jonas, because you also inspire us in our mission and our work to make film and to make media that is more authentic and honest. And so let's start with the beginning and tell us a little bit about maybe something about your thoughts on film and filmmaking that you can share with our public that's different than other filmmakers.
They're not different. They're not different. I mean, I cannot talk abstractly. Where do I begin? Cinema is, we are all those who make films. We make films. We all use cameras, and we all either we film from real life or we make up scenes and we film like in Hollywood. I mean, we are, there is nothing much to it. Any child today can film or tape, rather, because all of us has in our pockets, you know, one or two cameras. Anybody can operate them, and so it's the only thing I can, I can answer, some specific questions, but to talk in general, there is nothing much, nothing to it.
Let's talk.
You have a camera, you push the button, it goes.
So what about these Hollywood movies with their big budgets, and you have to have millions of dollars, and
if you have if you have to recreate like huge situations, wars, disasters, flying through space, fantasies, you have to create sets. You have to hire all those specialists, and there are always specialists in every area. And also actors who can really perform what you and create characters that you need to tell that story. You need money. You cannot do that without money. And there is a place for fantasies from times immemorial. We talk about 1,000 nights and one Arabian Nights. I mean, people always like to tell stories from the beginnings of humanity. It's part of the, if not, fairy tales, folk tales. Those are all stories that, and not for necessarily, we call them, like we say, it's for entertainment, but it's also partly education and information that is in those stories. And we can, if we read fairy tales and 1001 Nights, there is so much information about the thinking behavior of humanity during those periods, and mythology, everything is there. And when people will watch Hollywood movies, what will remain, what will be preserved in 200 years, let's say, there will be so much information in those films about the thinking of humanity today and how humans lived today. So Yes, I mean the cinema is a big tree with many different branches. Some tell stories. Then it's like in any other art. Some tell stories. Some like to sing. There is poetry. There is journalistic cinema. I mean essayistic cinema. There are so many different branches, and they all have place, function. They're all needed. If they wouldn't be needed, they wouldn't be there. They come into existence from a need that we have, in our lives, in the society, in how we communicate and how we live, and it's part of the current civilization.
I'm so glad you said that, Jonas, because I grew up having a father who was a projectionist. So I used to go watching movies a lot for free when I was a child, and I developed a love of Hollywood, which I still love. Claudia and I would like to watch Turner Classic Movies. We like the old movies in Hollywood. However, over the past maybe 10 or 15 years, I've gotten to be very attracted to avant-garde or independent films or experimental cinema, in particular through a place, the Film Forum in the Village, going to see films by experimental art, filmmakers like Jean-Luc Godard and the French New Wave, and then only recently discovering you and your work, and it's almost like a revelation to me when I watch your YouTubes online of some of your films, Walden from 1969, this idea that film is a way to educate consciousness in a way. The kind of experimental work that you do is different than Hollywood. So how did you choose your particular branch of cinema? Growing up, did you like commercial films?
I don't choose. I did not make. I did not choose. It chose me. I mean, I gravitated. It's very normally one gravitates to certain. Or in all areas of life, be it food or be it either you inherit or sort of as you grow up, or you slowly are pulled to one direction or other by what you are without knowing, without being conscious of it. Suddenly, at some point, you feel you're there. Suddenly I was there without any planning. There I am in the middle of cinema. I want to buy a camera. And why do I want to buy a camera? How did I come to that point? I don't know. Just by seeing many films, reading about it and talking about it. And somehow it, inside the way I was developing, what I wanted to tell to others, what I wanted to do, pulled me to the direction of cinema. Same as earlier in my life, I was pulled into written poetry, into writing. And then somehow, just before I landed in New York, I began around the age of 25, somewhere there. I began gravitating into cinema. So
you wound up in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Williamsburg, Brooklyn, you came to?
Yes, I landed in at the end of 1949. I ended up in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. So that my first 3 years of the New York life was really in Brooklyn. Then in the spring of '53, I escaped Brooklyn to Lower Manhattan, to Orchard Street, actually. Yes, but it began in Brooklyn.
How did you get in touch with the avant-garde, the Fluxus movement that was going on with Andy Warhol, people like that? Were you an integral part of that? I mean, Andy Warhol was the kind of guy who liked to film things. Also, he filmed the Empire State Building famously, 14 hours straight. Did you have an impact on Andy Warhol in terms of his filmmaking, or did he impact you in terms of your creativity? What was that relationship like with Warhol?
It's a long story how, I landed on Orchard Street. There I got involved immediately into screening films at Gallery East. That was spring '53. 1963 when I began screening films, meeting filmmakers, poets, and long story. I ended up by 62. I had a loft on Park Avenue South, with Park Avenue South and 29th Street. And then there was already, the film movement was very active. We created our own organization, New American Cinema Group. And in January 62, we created what became known as Film Makers Cooperative. And that was in my loft on 414 Park Avenue South. Now that loft, after the creation of the Filmmakers Cooperative, our own sort of distribution center, because nobody wanted to distribute our films, we had to do it, became like a gathering place for filmmakers, poets, photographers. You could see there Robert Frank, you could see there Allen Ginsberg, you could, and all the filmmakers.
It was very social, very social.
It was my house, and it was very open. At the same time, it was Filmmakers Cooperative, the office of the Filmmakers Cooperative, the office of Film Culture Magazine. It was a loft, and it made it very open. And they filmmakers used to come in the evening and show what they have done day before, exchange films, discuss. And that's where, I did not know Andy Warhol yet at that time. But I was told that he was there coming to my loft and watching films with other filmmakers. But I did not know, because there were many people coming, sitting on the floor. There were no chairs. But somebody told me, "You don't know Andy Warhol? He has been sitting on the floor in your loft for months, and you don't know Andy Warhol." I said, "No, and many people are coming." But that was his film school. He sat there, 62, 63, and then in 63 he decided, he met all the young filmmakers there, got excited, and met some of his future stars there also in my loft. And then he became I said, why, he decided to make a film himself. And I was running a film showcase just around the corner there, the Gramercy Arts Theater. And that's where he also screened his first films at my place. Just one short 3-minute film that he called Kiss, a series of kisses. Yes, before he made his 4 or 5 hour long, almost 6 long film, Sleep, which I also premiered there in the same place. So my loft was Andy's school, film school, and that's where he got excited about cinema. And we remained friends, because then later he went into, I helped him to shoot Empire. I was the cameraman on Empire. And so when he went into since I was always running showcases at the same time, that's where he screened his early films until like 68, when we premiered 67, 68, the Chelsea Girls. At that point I had a theater rented on 41st Street in Times Square. That's where the Chelsea Girls was premiered.
Let's talk a little bit about Walden, which was your first significant work, which came out in 1969, and which many people see it as a seminal document of the 60s generation, where you were just sort of hanging around people like John Lennon and Yoko Ono.
Hanging around. I was not hanging.
More than hanging around. Okay.
No, not more and not less. I was not hanging around.
You correct me then.
I did not need any of them. No, I was too busy to hang around. I was writing for the Village Voice. I had to see the films. I was writing every week. I was editing Film Culture magazine. I was running Filmmaker Cinematheque and showcases. And and they were organizing traveling exhibitions in Europe. The 60s, late 50s, 60s were a very, very busy period for me. I had no time to go and hang around with anybody. But like Andy, I told Andy came, he sat there, so I met Andy. He had films needed them to be shown, so I had a place. We had a working relationship. Later, Salvador Dali, I was not hanging around with Salvador Dali. He came to me. One day, he came to my loft, and he met other filmmakers there, and he decided himself to make some happening sort of films. And he needed some help, so he asked me to help him. So I during some of his happenings, I helped. I was around and I filmed, but it was not hanging around, helping, working. The same in every situation. With John Lennon, Yoko Ono, I met Yoko Ono actually when she needed somebody to help her to move from one place to another. And then, and that was in '61, it's that early. And then she went back to Japan, she had a child, she had the problems, and she wanted really to come back and settle down in the United States. So I helped her with the green, papers. I gave her a job at Film Culture. That's how Yoko Ono came to the United States. So not hanging around. It was always practical, down to earth, and I did not need them, they needed me.
If I could just clarify something, Jonas, all right? Because when I say hanging around, I mean it in a much more deeper philosophical way of spending time with people existentially and having conversations. And I don't mean it like goofing off or wasting time. And I say that in a way because something we talk a lot about on our show is that creativity often goes with a kind of productive laziness, that we need more free time to be with each other. And there's something about the 60s and 70s generation which I think we should go back to now in our fast-paced culture. Everything is going so fast and rapid, and people are overworked. In this golden age of...
Are they overworked?
Some people are overworked?
No, I think people don't work hard enough. I work.
You're doing creative work. What about...
No, I don't do creative. I'm telling you the truth, I don't believe in creativity at all. I just do what I want to do, and I try to do as well as I can. And it has nothing to do with creativity. Everybody talks, I want to be creative. Who needs creativity? Creativity usually now has become like some kind of a sport or something, like where it's the creative people, those who, or a fad. It has become a fad and a fashion. And in every area, this creativity fad is destroying my audio field, my visual field, with banality, with not sticking to something needed and practical, or like a good chair to sit down, but they will, I am creative. I will invent a different chair. I will redesign it. But chairs have been invented thousands of years ago, and people perfected to that you can really sit comfortably and your back will be good. You don't have to go to doctor. Now they sit in modern chairs designed by creative people, and you get your back goes wrong. When you have to go to the immediately. Most of the people, when still very young, they are complaining about their backs, their every part of their body, because everything is destroyed by creative people, but the designers. I'm talking just about one aspect, but the same in every area, So that what I do, I just do what I feel I need to do, and I know how to do, and I want to do it, and share with others. And it's necessary. If it's not necessary, I don't want to do. It was needed that somebody writes about the independent cinema in the Village Voice, so I started writing because nobody else was writing.
Who was the editor of The Voice?
Jerry Tallmer was, yes, at that point.
And Norman Mailer was also writing?
Norman Mailer was there too, yes. There got a lot of good people. And there was no film magazine, but it was needed because there was a new young generation of writers, of filmmakers interested to talk about cinema, to discuss cinema, and there was no platform. So we needed it. That's why I started with my brother, the magazine, from necessity. If it's not needed, why do it? Yes. The same was with the Filmmakers Cooperative. Nobody wanted to distribute our films. There was a need for our own distribution center. So I called some 30 filmmakers together, and we created our own distribution center, Filmmakers Cooperative. And it's still there, by the way. Wow. So from necessity, if you try to do something, and the same with anthology film archives, there was a need, for film, for selected kind of film screenings, to preserve films, to preserve what has been created during the earlier generations and decades, and from necessity. If you try to do something that is not needed, you will have a problem.
What would your message be now to people like my wife and I, and to young filmmakers today? What do you see looking out at the cultural, political, educational situation in 2016? What is the necessity? What direction do you think film needs to go now?
I cannot tell. It's and nobody can direct it one way or other. It goes from inside by itself. What humanity needs, and that is internet, of course. It's digital. It's internet, and we are there already. That where all of us, any of us, we have our websites, we exchange images immediately, and very personally. There is a need for this very personal contact and exchange, like we used to write letters and postcards. Now we just go to computer and we pull out from the pocket our little thing, and we right there send images, and that's where we are. I think that civilization has become so impersonal. All that corporations, everything is the same. Everybody, and I mean it's more complicated because some of the sameness now is being spread by the digital, now culture, civilization, that like somebody dresses up in some way somewhere in Nebraska and puts it on, and it's immediately on YouTube everywhere, and in Japan, in Alaska, in the North Pole, and I will do the same. I will dress up like that also, or
a certain banality as well.
But still, it's a personal choice. There are 8 billion of us, but even the twins are never really the same. There are some differences in one family, the two twins. So every one of us, every one of those 8 billion is slightly somewhere we differ. We have something of our own. So that all those choices, there are similarities from 8 billion, of course, several millions maybe do exactly want to do the same thing, but then several other millions. After all, we are, we are part of humanity. We are essentially somewhere we are not that different from each other. So different continents very often separate us. Religions separate us for maybe 100 years or 200 years. Then we come again together. We mix. Like what we have now, all these horrible things that are happening, around the world, is partially because of those divisions of organized political systems, organized religious systems. We are temporarily, we are really in a very bad situation.
We like to try.
I think it's temporary, and it's not very nice, and it's not very beautiful what we have, but it's temporary.
That's very hopeful, Jonas. And so we try to.
Because I'm lately very much interested in history. I'm reading a lot of the 3rd century, of the earlier, even before Jesus Christ. And I find out that it's situations like what we have now, it's nothing new. We are going through what Roman Empire went in the second part of the 3rd century. Like I'm reading Saint Jerome, writings of Saint Jerome of the 3rd century. And those, about the saints. The saints, usually we dismiss, we laugh, the saints, they just pray to God, they walk around with their hands, put together, they're angels. No, some of those saints of the past centuries, they were scholars, they were immensely educated people speaking many languages and very knowledgeable in literatures and scriptures of the, like Saint Jerome. He translated the Bible into Latin. He was the one, but he also spoke he was familiar with the Egyptian writing, it's a scholar. And in one of his text letters, he writes about how the hordes are coming from the east on horses, and the Romans don't know what to do, they're panicking. All those Romans, the greatest army of the period, they're running because those hordes on those wild horses, they're so horrible, they kill women and children, and just like ISIS now, from this description. And this is the 3rd century. But we are going to stop them. No, they did not manage to stop them. They took over the Roman Empire, and of course they changed as they came. They changed. They were not that horrible anymore, but at some point. But that's what we have today. And we say, oh, sure, it's easy, we're going. But history tells that the power and the civilization sometimes is powerless against when it's something very, very uncontrollable happens in certain areas. It just changes the whole civilization. So, yes, that's, yes.
Well, we try to be optimistic, I guess you could say, as an educator. Hope is something that runs strong for me as a professor of English and also as an educator through this television show.
There is responsibility of each of us. I consider that my responsibility is to do everything right every moment of my life, because the future depends on what the next moment, what it will be, depends on what I do this moment, or what humanity, all of us do this moment, individually and together, determine the next moment. So imagine what responsibility we have. You have immense responsibility for the present moment. And also, we had to remember, okay, I'm talking about Saint Jerome, but there were many saints, many poets, many scientists in the past centuries who devoted their lives in trying to improve humanity, did everything that humanity would be more beautiful. So it's our responsibility not to betray them. It's our responsibility to continue their work, not to betray them. They believed in it. And that's where, that's why we have, books of poetry. That's where sometimes in the evening we can still sit down and read something like Melville. These are three great short stories that I really advise. Moby Dick, greatest novel written in English, maybe. But here is, read Billy Budd, read Benito Cereno, and read The Enchanted Isles by Herman Melville. Short novels, amazing, classics, great. I'm rereading now this.
This speaks to me in my heart as an educator who believes in literature, the power of literature, and also
that is beauty. The whole past of our culture, what's best in humanity, is locked in those writings, in those lines, in those texts. The human spirit, is recorded indirectly, and it's like comes back through those words as you read, and floats there and affects you and affects humanity. So it's that's art also. That's painting and music does that too. But of course, everything can be also used for to distort, also for negative or misled kind of purposes. Many of the political, systems, writings, and what I think what's happening now, there is a lot of really black, negative kind of thing. But in my films, as you have noticed, I concentrate only on the ecstatic, on celebrations, the moments of celebration and joy and happiness, because that's what's being neglected now. Everybody, there's so much black. You go into art shows, you don't see even color. It's so much always dark, like you're supposed to be very critical about everything and show all the negative and ugly things. But what about the beautiful things? If you are too long with the blackness and negative and darkness, it begins to affect you, and your mood, you become gloomier and gloomier by the minute, and you go then out into some summer field full of flowers and birds there and beasts and insects, and suddenly you are happy. You are there. Life, and it's not so So I am for that. Somebody has to take a stand for that. I believe that the camera cinema has been created in order to celebrate the life and what's on this, the beautiful aspects of creation, and not to. And the devil put the money bag in front of the camera. I said, why do you want to celebrate the creation of God when you can make money with it? But then, and then everybody ran after the money bag, So then God said, no, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I should now, how to correct this? I know. I will create an independent filmmaker. Yes. And the independent filmmaker will never make any money. But independent filmmakers will celebrate the creation and will sing and will create poetry. But you will never make money if you are an independent filmmaker. Yeah. Wow. So then, but the devil was still smart. Said, okay, you can make your films, but I will see that they fall to pieces as they fall to dust. Then God said, I am not going, you are not going to undermine my work. I will create the film archivist. So there comes the film archivist and film archives, and there is even International Film Archives Federation. Anthology Film Archives is part of the federation. There are 6 film archives that are members from United States in the Museum of Modern Art, UCLA, Library of Congress, Anthology, and Eastman Kodak. And we do everything to preserve the film. Again, money is needed to do that, but there are people, filmmakers like Scorsese, who is very dedicated to film preservation, and he created the film, film preservation, a kind of foundation, helping. And there are others like Lucas, is dedicated very much to film preservation. Yeah, so, okay, we now...
I was watching a Hollywood movie the other day with my students, because I like to show films in class also. And the film we were watching is Bulworth, Warren Beatty's film, which has a kind of a radical edge to it. And in the film, he plays a senator, and he's talking to a group of Hollywood bigwigs in Beverly Hills, and he says to them, you guys, you make all kinds of movies and you spend a lot of money on them. He said, but none of them are very good. Why do you think that they're not very good? He said, it must be the money. It turns everything to crap,
But it's not true.
Are there any Hollywood films that you like or admire?
Money that makes films good or bad. Okay. It's the filmmaker behind the camera, behind the film, that makes the film good or bad, not the money. Money is neutral. You can make some very good films have been made with a lot of money, and very good films were made with no money, and very bad films have been made with no money. Also, so money is not. It's bet to those who bet you can make films just to make money. There are films that are produced like a factory going just to make money. That's something else.
What is it doing to the consciousness of the American people to have decades and decades of watching movies that are very formulaic and kind of the same and stale?
It's doing much less damage than than television. It's not that many people around in the back lands of the country are, and fewer actually are watching films, but they sit for hours and children and watch in front of television sets, and that's where not only that those melodramas are being played, but every 3 minutes there is an ad selling you some horrible medical stuff or corporations, like 1/3 and 1/4 of the time is the advertisement selling something that people don't need at all. But it's hypnosis. The people watch, seeing it for the 50th time, they decide that maybe I need it. Maybe I'm really sick. Maybe I need it, and they go and they buy and get sick.
Like Prozac and things like for depression. What about shows like these reality shows, like the Kardashians?
Are designed to make money to sell, sponsored by usually big corporations, corporate money, and it's all they're all the same.
What about Donald Trump? He's running for president now, and he had the reality show The Apprentice,
I have not seen it.
No desire?
No, I just too busy. I have no time. Sorry, I think so Trump. I had no time to watch. I have no time to watch.
Do you think we could get Donald Trump and people like that into this kind of experimental cinema? Do you think people can be educated?
I do not believe in experimental cinema. You are touching very sensitive spot here, because I do not know anybody who is experimenting in cinema. They call Brackett or somebody experimental filmmaker. He's not experimenting. He's just making films the way he wants to make them. He just goes and does it. There is no experimentation involved. So this term is totally total nonsense. But we are talking more or less about the poetic aspect of that big tree, poetic branches of the tree. Called cinema. So of course there are stories that are needed, and there are stories that are very cheap and melodramatic, a lot of it on television, all those serials. And then there are a little bit more, the more serious wing of narrative. But then in between all the journalistic forms, the real life diaristic forms, cinema verite, and then you go into more poetic forms. And it's that, and all of the humanity needs all of those different forms. Needs stories, needs journalism that's factual, real life, and needs also poetry. It's in us, in our what we are, and that's from times immemorial. We have that. Only that cinema until like 50, 60 years ago, the narrative was developing and journalistic forms were developing, but the poetic forms were not developing. But the beginning like 50s, they were, it began in the 20s there in France, Germany, Italy.
What about Eisenstein? He was one of the big ones, right?
But we are talking about their forms of Eisenstein was part of the development of the narrative cinema, not poetic forms, where it's sort of indirectly, we have, like in literature, we know very clearly. There are books of poetry, there are poets, and there are prose writers.
But then, where
in between begins to merge, of course, the epic poetry, like Ulysses. It's both story and poetry. But Eisenstein was, of course, was telling a story. Yes.
What about Jean-Luc Godard?
Jean-Luc Godard was telling, of course, stories, but there was in him, there is so much, a big, not propaganda aspect in his thinking, I don't know how to
He was part of the left. He was on the left.
No, I wouldn't call it propaganda. There is so much intellectual pretension in some of his later works, not in the early, but the pretension that I cannot take it. I cannot swallow the later Godard.
You haven't seen his recent work, like Film Socialism?
The very, very late, I have to tell you that my left eye was always very weak, so the 3D cinema, my left was still, both eyes were equally strong when during the early 3D period in the 50s, 60s, but then it got weaker and weaker, so that I cannot really evaluate and really appreciate or enjoy the 3D cinema.
Oh, 3D,
so
yeah.
yes, but concerning Godard, so that I saw his last film, but I did not get what everybody else got from it. I cannot take his intellectual, philosophical, political nonsense, pretensions, very pretentious, and it sounds effective. It says it's for effect. And it's effective when you swallow it, and then you begin to think, what is this that you said? And then you realize it's total nonsense, and it's total nonsense. It's okay. So it reflects, I think, not only him, but a lot of the contemporary, his generation. So you would say that, okay, he just reflects, that's how it is. Everybody, there is so much of this intellectual pretension, but not the way he presents, like first person almost. Or those, but I'm very much for the early Godard. Yes.
Just thinking about film as a source of education and also as a source of potential enlightenment about the political situation as well, the connection between film and politics. Do you have anything to say about film and politics? Amos Vogel is a person who had, the Cinema 16, which was, a very famous place that was the first film society in America. You went to it.
Not the first.
Well, you.
Not the first.
What's your thoughts about Amos Vogel?
Important film society created in the 50s, went into the 60s, and it was one of my universities. Museum of Modern Art and Cinema 16. MoMA was more for the classical cinema and the 20s avant-garde, 30s, and Cinema 16 was created to represent more contemporary, in the 40s, 50s, of what was happening now. So it was very, very performed a very important function, of course, yes.
And then Vogel founded the New York Film Society or New York Film Festival.
Yes, he was the first director. It took some persuasion, and he had enough power or was persistent enough to and use the right arguments and enough backing and persuaded the city to create the New York Film Society that is in charge of the New York Film Festival. Yes.
What about a connection now? I'm getting a sense just from this dialogue with you that there's a linkage here in your work between psychology and film, because if you can show images that are beautiful and positive, that can have a uplifting effect on our psyches as human beings, that we can see the good and see the potential and the sense of possibility in the world. And could that also have a larger political meaning also?
Of course, I mean, it is. I mean, it's would be banal to say yes, because everything, absolutely everything that we do has political aspect. Political aspect is what has to do with the style of life, how we live, we believe, what we believe in, how we should live, and there could be negative, of course, politics and positive politics. Positive politics to me are those that contribute to improving our living conditions, our style, our attitude to life. Okay, like the greatest politicians of the last few decades that I really admire were the Buckminster Fuller, who changed the attitude and style and of the places in which we live, how we build them, and because the spaces in which we live affect and change us. And then, of course, John Cage, through the attitude to sounds around us and the music, changed, and then Beat Generation, democratizing sort of arts and life, again bringing a new, very positive attitude. Even Fluxus, Fluxus bringing in the sense of humor into the arts, into life, stressing that aspect. These are the positive politics. And those who are in Washington, in Moscow, and those are the negative politicians. Those are that are trying to impose some ideas of their own that have nothing to do with improving really the style of life, the attitude to life. Just thinking about money, jobs. But that's not everything. That's the secondary. That is secondary. The first, the center is what we are as human beings.
Right, but then you can't ignore the politics either. You can't ignore the practical politics. And if I could just say one thing, Jonas, that Bernie Sanders now is running for president. He's getting a lot of excitement, and he's getting people excited, and he is taking on the billionaire class, and he's bringing up why big money is corrupting our politics.
But Sanders is not taking corporation monies. He's not trying to impose. He's only telling, and you can take or reject. But all the others are putting big advertisements to take all the money, and once they are in power, they are just pushing their own agendas. Or the agendas of corporations. That's what we had till now, and afraid that America will choose somebody else who will continue the same, slightly different way. And but Bernie is coming with completely more up to date, more like idea of the how it should be. You see, but those are the positive politics. Yeah.
What's interesting also, Jonas, is that Bernie talks a lot about Europe. He's always pointing towards Denmark and Sweden and the European model. And you come out of Europe, and is there anything that we could learn?
He's referring to Europe, but at the same time, he's not proposing the same of what Europe has. I think, I think he's realistic enough to know. He knows that the ground in which he wants to make those changes is very different from what Europe was when Sweden changed slightly, went gradually into certain forms of socialism. It will be different, but still. What he's proposing is very idealistic and very pure, and has nothing to do. It's not something that he wants that people would choose that, not to really impose,
Yes.
like with guns or. The way politicians come, they have an idea, and if you don't accept it, they will try to force it. They cannot do it with a gun, they will get a Kalashnikov. If that doesn't work, they will get a tank. If that doesn't work, they will get atom bomb. To push their own political some idea or system.
Well, we're almost out of time here. We have about 3 minutes left.
For
Sanders, an endorsement from Jonas Mekas in Brooklyn, New York. Another Brooklyn guy, okay? So now, just as we wrap up, let's sort of like wrap up with cinema now, Jonas, and if there's anything you want to share with us, with the public about what's next? What's next on your agenda?
We are not even in cinema anymore. We are in digital culture, civilization, technology. Film. Film has already. Film is history, and cinema. Okay, cinema as moving images. Cinema, the word cinema means moving images. Okay. So in that sense, yes, we still have moving images, and we will continue, though, on different materials, different technology, and we are not at the end yet in what we have now in digital art. I mean, we have already, the virtual reality, also technology coming in. I don't think it will last. It's more. I think it's more like maybe as a gimmick, but I do not believe that. I may be wrong. There are different. We don't know into what it will change. What we have in VR, virtual reality right now, but that's the future is there and present and is there.
I want to just close with an observation and a kind of a silly
and incredible possibilities for humanity still move back towards paradise.
They named a storm after you, sir.
Sorry,
Jonas, the blizzard.
I did everything to minimize it by the time it came to New York.
The storm? Well, they still have remnants outside, and it's beautiful. The patches of snow as we walked here from the subway in Brooklyn.
Snow. I like snow. I think we should all enjoy. It's thanks to nature. I mean, it's great that nature. I mean, we think that we have all the power. We can control nature, but nature sometimes comes back and shows, nature is still nature.
Yes.
You cannot control me.
I love the snow too, and I got that from my mother, and I'm getting that from you right now. Snow is a good thing, and nature is beautiful.
Yes, we should accept it as part of nature and love it and enjoy it instead of snow. Snow, beautiful.
Snow. Here in Brooklyn with Jonas Mekas, one of the great innovators of American avant-garde cinema. Thank you so much for spending time with us, sir. You're a great inspiration to me and Claudia and to many people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.